How does one in such a rapidly changing field like this stay on top of all the tools that are emerging? Even Clay, for example, is hard to stay on top of itself. You all are always launching new things. and it's not just Clay, obviously. You want to stay on top of the adjacent tools as well.
The problem you're naming is that there's two sources of growth information, right? One is new and emerging tools and competitors. Like you could just look at the hundreds of companies coming out of YC every year and be like, okay, there's a whole slew of new things that I can do now. I think lots of people feel overwhelmed just staying on top of the existing tools that they know in their tech stack. And then you experience, new tool fatigue. I didn't explore or spend the time even to learn about the tool until I had a use case mapped to it. And then I also didn't spend the time even exploring the use case until it became a
Yash, excited to have you here.
What's up, Nathan? Excited to be here. This is going to be a fun chat.
It is. Yeah. We're both nerds, I think, in some of the same ways. So yeah, gonna be fun to geek out. So quick intro. Yash was a Renaissance GTM engineer before the term GTM engineer existed. He's head of education at Clay, is behind Clay University, has worked with Seth Godin on MBA, which I just found out. Actually, I didn't realize they stopped running.
They stopped. Yeah.
But incredible program from what I hear. People have gone through it.
I'm still friends with a bunch of the alumni and other coaches that I met through the program. So absolutely agree.
I've had several conversations with Yash over over
2 years now?
Around 2 years now. And
has to be. My 2-year anniversary today was literally yesterday. So
wow. Okay.
There you go.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yash has been incredibly helpful for the bootcamp. He's given a bunch of advice, connections with people that have really helped as well. So I'm super grateful for him. He's a very deep thinker on all things learning and education. And yeah, just really excited to geek out today. And I hope people enjoy it.
Yeah, likewise. And thankful for you as well. I think you still are, right? Like one of the few and definitely by far the first Clay bootcamp person out there, and you've been doing an incredible job training people. So appreciate all the work you've been putting into it as well.
Thank you. All right. So I view the Clay universe as a sort of rainforest. When it started out 2 years ago, when you started with Clay, it was a pretty different environment, but the Clay universe is like a rainforest, and you have an incredible vantage point to see how people are making money in the Clay ecosystem. What are some of the ways you see people making money with Clay?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? I think the most obvious one and the one that most people who have looked to make money with Clay have probably seen is the experts program. And I think one of the exciting things about Clay is that we've built this entire ecosystem of people leveraging and supplying and providing services based around Clay. That is the most obvious. Like I can build an agency, and that agency, we can dive into all the different ways that agency could exist, can make money using Clay. But I think the other things that I'll mention too as little honorable mentions are also equivalently helpful. One that I think is increasing in velocity, you were the first to this and very early, is Clay training. Mm-hmm. And there's a cost benefit analysis to be done around whether or not someone wants Clay training or wants just Clay done for you. Yeah. The natural progression at most companies is you may start with, I want it done for me, and then you will maybe want to migrate it internally, and then you maybe want to hire people who are Clay proficient. So as you see the longer tail of all of that grow, I saw GTM Engineering School just popped up. I've seen a few other people offer cold outbound accelerators like Cold IQ. And I think the education ecosystem is going to continue to grow and be a valuable place for people to spend time.
Yep.
And then the last one is just content. I think I see more and more people posting content around Clay, hosting conferences, doing meetups. And as long as you're providing value in some tangible, concrete, meaningful way, there's an opportunity for you to convert that value into cash.
Totally. Yes. I'm seeing also a trend of people trying to become GTM engineers in companies, and even more so the trend of companies looking for GTM engineers as well.
Yeah.
Which is such an interesting skill set.
It's one of the first jobs, I think, which is part of why I love it. I think in a pre-GTM engineering world, the only job that really spoke to a generalist type persona, it was, I guess there were two options. There's business operations, which means everything and nothing at the same time. You're kind of deployed across an entire company and you're on the go. Special projects would be another area that generalists tend to succeed. And the last one was like rotational programs. So if you want to do like the Facebook rotational
Hmm.
product manager program, you run through a couple of different divisions, but even that was like a generalist rotation with the aim of specializing and placing you somewhere at the end of it all. So I think GTM Engineer is an exciting career option for people who want to be generalists and be flexible and fluid across a tech stack and be able to think dynamically between sales, customer success, marketing, et cetera.
Makes sense. Yeah. With expert generalists like yourself, it's a hard role to be good at because the algorithm that I see people who do this well, such as yourself, do is you figure out what's the highest impact problem that I can help solve,
Right.
and then like rapidly develop the skills or leverage the skills that you already have to just dive in. So it requires the ability to learn really quickly and create impact.
I agree. I think it's a prerequisite for these types of jobs, right? Is that there is no like there is no end journey to being a generalist, which I think is a little bit different from specialists. And I'm not saying that specialists also have an end journey. I think there's a continuous learning journey no matter who you are. But I think the weighing of how important it is to be able to learn quickly and stay on top of new trends is far, far higher in a job that demands a generalist type position than one that requires specialization.
Yeah, you get diminishing returns as you specialize. Or at least that's in certain situations you get diminishing returns, but you're always on the curve of learning the 20% most impactful things out of the 80% you could learn. Yeah.
Exactly. I think like a really easy example here I think about all the time is you can think about doctors, lawyers, and then let's just say GTM engineers. If I'm a doctor and let's say I specialize in, I don't know, brain surgery, that's a great example because neuroscience and the way we understand the human brain is rapidly evolving as well, but it's fixed within a field and like you can probably reliably subscribe to the major sources and publications that will keep you abreast of any updates.
Yeah.
Lawyers are sort of similar, but maybe different. If you're like a lawyer in an IP practice, that information is refreshing as legislation refreshes every now and then, and you have a set system of tools that actually help you stay on top of changes to important practices in the law field. Yeah. If you're a GTM engineer, you have AI, you have outbound tech, you have CRM, you have marketing tools, you have ads. You have to figure out which of those you're most interested in and like which priorities you're going to shift on, and then also stay on top of the trends in all of those areas. And so I think the information to knowledge ratio shifts significantly.
How does one in such a rapidly changing field like this stay on top of all the tools that are emerging and even Clay, for example, is hard to stay on top of itself. You all are always launching new things. And it's not just Clay, obviously, you want to stay on top of the adjacent tools as well.
Yeah, it's a really tough problem that I think a lot of people ask me actually, because the problem you're naming is that there's two sources of growth information, right? One is new and emerging tools and competitors. Like you could just look at the hundreds of companies coming out of YC every year and be like, okay, there's a whole slew of new things that I can do now. And then on top of that, even for your chosen tech stack, what's really great today is going to shift into what's really great next month. And so like Clay is a good example. I pick any like popular GTM tool like Unify, Common Room come to mind immediately. They're also consistently shipping at high velocity and trying to get users to expand the surface area of what they're doing. I think lots of people feel overwhelmed just staying on top of the existing tools that they know in their tech stack. And then you experience, new tool fatigue. You get so tired just trying to be on top of your existing skill sets and tools that it becomes really hard for you to keep exploring other new tools. Yeah, we can dive into this more too, but I have a bunch of ways I think about how to stay abreast of the best information while still maintaining sanity. Because I think, like, here's a good example. I was talking to a friend a few weeks ago, and I was just like, have you seen Deep Research? Have you seen OpenAI Operator? And she responded to me and was like, yeah, it seems fine. Like, I use Perplexity for everything, and Perplexity is great. And I was like, I don't know how to tell you that Deep Research is fundamentally different from Perplexity. This friend is an investor, right? And so I was like, you need to start thinking about investment memos, market research using Deep Research. And I think that, which is part of this framework we can talk about, helped her be like, oh, okay, let me go try Deep Research on my investment memos. And that use case for her turned it into, okay, now this is a tool that I want to start using regularly and repeatedly.
Very nice.
But I think a lot of the problem with tool fatigue for a lot of people is that it's shiny object syndrome. You like see this tool that lets you, for example, if there's a Claybook that does this. I can generate personalized landing pages for thousands of customers. That sounds amazing. Do I actually need to generate personalized landing pages for thousands of customers based on my job today? That answer is going to vary depending on what I do and what I'm focused on.
Right. And so what do you do if you don't need it for your job versus if you do?
Yeah, I think I sort of categorize the way I digest information into two buckets. There's like, okay, this exists, and I'm always working on immediately mapping what exists to like potential use cases in my head. Here's another, I'll just keep using examples because I think examples are helpful.
Sure.
Right. I encountered, I'll use a non-clay tool, Gumloop, a few months, actually a year ago now. And it seemed really cool at the time. It's this like AI native Zapier-esque platform, but I really just couldn't understand how it's fundamentally different from Zapier or Make. So I diminished my shiny object syndrome and was like, okay, I'm just going to keep doing things with AI Zapier and AI Make until I hit like some use case where I'd be like, oh, I wonder if this is doable because I can't do it in an existing tool, and I'll come back to Gumloop. Fast forward to last month, we wanted to build a system where we analyze all of the feedback we get in Slack and catalog it and categorize it and summarize it in a way so that it's not getting lost.
Right.
So that people feel heard and that we're constantly prioritizing the things that people send us. I couldn't build it in Zapier or Make. And so that was my trigger to go message the Gumloop friend that I have and say, hey, here's the thing I'm trying to do. I think your tool is capable of doing it, but you tell me, is this easy to do or is it not? And he was like, yeah, this is definitely doable. We hopped on a call for 2 hours. He was incredibly useful. And we built the whole system. Yeah, I mean, it took me a moment to wrap my head around it. But now I sort of know, okay, Gumloop is a great tool for when I have loop-based automations or like historical data that I really want to run through a repeated cycle and be able to like dynamically go from single input to loops of inputs all in one flow. And that's very technical jargon speak for people, but now I have that mapped in my head, right? So I didn't explore or spend the time even to learn about the tool until I had a use case mapped to it. And then I also didn't spend the time even exploring the use case until it became a priority in my day-to-day work. And so there's this constant sphere of like, OpenAI Operator is a good example. I tested it on Clay. There's a, can it go through and make a Clay table and find a list of people and add an enrichment? The answer is yes, which is pretty crazy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I just prompted AI Operator. I was like, hey, find me a list on clay.com of 1,000 people that work in software development at companies larger than 500 based in New York, then add their work emails to the table, then go ahead and add a formula that aggregates all their experience. It got all the way up to the formula, where the formula was a bit janky, but the rest of it did perfectly.
Very nice.
And so like, that's okay, cool. I know the realm of what's possible, and then I'm always doing diligence on whether or not I need to reach into the realm of what's possible to enhance my day-to-day work.
Very nice. You maintain a mental map. Sounds like it's not written down on paper, but like a mental map of all the things out there. It sounds like when you dive in, you're also, the two examples you gave at least, you're talking with a person who can tell you, hey, this is possible. Let me show you, and maybe a let me show you how sort of thing as a shortcut.
Exactly. And I think one of the best things about AI today is that AI is a shortcut for that as well.
Yeah.
If you think about the procedure as I'm exploring all new tech, and then I map all the new tech to the possible use cases that I could have for that tech, and then I only action those use cases and actually spend the time to learn the tool when I feel like it's an important element of my work today.
Yeah.
You can also just ask AI, hey, I think so-and-so can do this. Can you find any examples of it being done? Perplexity is a great option for this to crawl the web. And then also AI can give you even a skeleton of like, hey, here's how I think you would do this thing in this tool. And then that gives me a huge jump start on trying to figure out how to apply that use case to the new tool that I'm using.
And this algorithm sounds like it compresses learning down probably at least 5x.
Oh, for sure.
If not a lot more compared to.
If you imagine that you like get, and this is realistic, I think, with the pace of software today, I read email newsletters that each of their own have like new tools and like cool things to try every day. There's probably at least 50 to 100 new software tools in my email inbox every week. Of that 50 to 100, there's maybe 5, maybe 10 that would be interesting to my work today. But then the amount that I actually want to go explore and spend time learning goes down to like 0 or 1 if I am being diligent about this is not relevant to my work today. And then the last thing that I would say here is I think I've explained this framework to people before, and people have said, hey, sometimes it's hard for me to figure out the like mental mapping from here's this cool product, what are the use cases I might have? That's another area that AI is really good for. You can just go into AI and say, hey, there's this tool, let's call it Gumloop, right? It does so and so. Here's the stuff that I do today. What are some potential exciting use cases that I should be thinking about for it? And then all you need is that. You just need that to be in your mental map model of the tool landscape, and you move on. You don't spend time clicking on the tool. You don't sign up for the free trial. You just know it exists and you can come back to it when you want later. So you only invest time in learning what you need to learn when you need to learn it.
That's awesome. Super useful. It reminds me, you did a LinkedIn post recently about AI helping you, like becoming a polymath, you could say, is becoming easier because AI compresses the time to do kind of this process that you're talking about so much faster. And so,
Yeah, 100%. I think AI just helps you personalize everything to your own context much quicker. And it helps you take shortcuts that otherwise, I would have to have gone and done some Google research and been like, what are people using this tool for? What are like some ways that I should be thinking about it if I'm not able to immediately make that jump from here's what this thing does to how could I use this thing?
so you talked about kind of changing subjects a little bit. You talked about becoming a clay expert, and they're inside, I think there are what, 80, 90 people on the page now.
Yeah, right in that range.
Something like that. A lot. Yeah. In that group of people, there are a lot of different things that people do.
Correct.
Maybe you could talk about the different ways that people as experts make money from clay.
Yeah, so I would say first off, this is something we're working on. I think in the like experts page itself, there's a mixture of agencies, and then there's also a mixture of like, I think your bootcamp is on there. I think a few other people's accelerators on there separately. We will eventually just parse it into education versus agency partners. The vast majority, in fact, all of them at bare minimum have an agency. And the thing that's interesting about the agency partnerships, especially considering a tool like Clay, is that most of them focus in different parts of the market. Most of them focus on different sizes of companies in the market. And as a result, most of them have different focuses in terms of what they're really good at doing, what their bread and butter is. So to give some examples of the ways that I think people in very different ways make money as agency partners of Clay. One is we have folks who specifically focus on small business to like lower end of the mid-market tier. A lot of those folks on average tend to be very cold outbound focused because at that stage and size of business, what you care most about is top of funnel, potential revenue, leads. But then we also have a growing number of folks, this has been part of the motion behind the Enterprise Partner Program recently, who have moved up market in the clients that they serve. So imagine you are working with the OpenAIs or the Gongs of the world, and those companies may want your help with outbound potentially at some point, sure. But the primary problem they're actually looking to outsource is, I want a reliable source of truth in my CRM data, and not a single large company I've ever talked to has ever said, I am proud of our CRM hygiene. Because, we can go into this rabbit hole if we want, there's a million reasons why CRMs inevitably end up messy no matter what company you work at. And so that shifts the realm, right? Like now you're doing more data organization, cleaning, refreshing, manipulation work in the CRM world versus this like, I might be a little bit more copywriting focused, a little bit more AI focused, a little bit more general creativity focused on each business in an outbound world. Eric Nowoslawski is one of the kings of the outbound world, as we know, on that agency delivery for Clay. And I would say like Go Nimbly is a really good recent example of an enterprise partner that does specifically revenue ops implementations at all of their customer companies. And so there's a million and one different use cases across the spectrum. You can even just go to the Clay website. I can list them right now. It's like inbound, outbound, TAM sourcing, CRM enrichment, sales assistant, AI web scraping as a source, lead scoring. And that's just the ones we have listed. There's plenty more that you could dip your toe into and just do boutique services like Patrick does at the Kiln.
I see also a lot of talk about like Jacob Tuweiner recently announced on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I think he said his LinkedIn headline is HubSpot plus Clay makes data problems go away or something. And super specialized, like CRM enrichment for one CRM, and dozens or hundreds more potential niches like that.
And I think the other thing that's worth noting about this is that these are still massive markets, right? Like Jacob pivoted his business into full CRM enrichment. We have a whole blog post about it, so I'll let people read that if they want. But he was an outbound shop for a while.
Yeah.
And then the big thing that hit him were the new inbox rules from Google and Yahoo and Microsoft around cold email, spam, number of emails you could send. And I think he just made a decision about, do I want to specialize in this like black box area, which again, you have Erics of the world who've been like, I'm going to figure it out. And that's still my bread and butter. And then you have Jacobs who are like, that could be my bread and butter, but I actually feel like from the experience I've gotten working with people, I want to move more into this segment of the market. And these are all like, there are people creating 7, even 8-figure businesses just on HubSpot or Salesforce CRM implementation alone, because those are such massive software companies that serve, what, 90% probably of the CRM market?
I'm waiting personally to see, I think it's starting to happen, but HubSpot and Salesforce shops adding on Clay as a service. They're two fairly different mindsets. I think we have New Edge Growth. They are on the Clay, that maybe maybe there's some other ones as well, but not too many people
Not
in there
yet,
yet,
and that's
but
been intentional, right?
not yet.
Like a secret that I'll give out here is that this is part of the enterprise partner program that we started developing back in August of last year. Just a quick backstory, right? The enterprise partner program was birthed out of the idea that we have this growing ecosystem of partners. They're specializing in different areas. They're also moving up market. And eventually, over the long tail of the partner ecosystem we want to grow, we want this to become hundreds and thousands of people that are just using Clay for millions of people around the world. So you need to create some sort of a tiering system that like showcases, okay, how many average clients does this person serve? Like HubSpot has their own version of this, which is the like, I forget what the actual words are, like silver, gold, platinum, diamond. And I think that's one element of making this like large ecosystem a little bit more digestible.
Right.
But there's a bunch of other things that I think we have planned that I won't share quite yet on trying to make it more personalized. Because I think one of the problems with the HubSpot or the Salesforce directory today is that I go in there, let's say, I have the budget to work with a diamond partner. Great, show me all the diamond partners. There's still hundreds. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of work now for me as a customer to figure out who do I actually reach out to and what is the difference between these hundreds of companies besides the name and the logo.
Yeah, excited to learn more as that kind of becomes more public.
For sure. But I think back to your original question, right? We got a lot of interest from HubSpot shops in particular to start adding Clay as a service to their offerings. So New Edge is a good example. Mm-hmm. Go Nimbly actually is another good one. Apparatus, Avidly, Blue Frog. So there's a number of what I would call new Clay experts who already have these large multi-million-dollar businesses doing revenue operations, but are interested in adding this new slice of software that expands their ability to sell into the customers that they work with, and also the surface area of what they can cover because they're automating more of the work that they were previously doing manually through these shops.
Amazing. Very nice. We have these big companies that are adding Clay on as a service, and I expect most of the people who are going to watch this in the future are starting from the opposite end of the spectrum. They're probably someone who's wants to go out on their own, want to start a business, have more freedom. They may be a bit technical or they're very technical, and they see that Clay is a potentially lucrative place to focus. How would you, like, as a new person, like if you were a new person, how should they think about starting to make money from Clay?
Yeah, I think so. If you're new and just getting started, I think one of the problems, and we were just talking about this pre-show, is that a lot of people are like, I want to be on the experts directory, but then we don't approve people to be on the experts directory until you have some chosen metric of success, which for us is like at least, I think, 10K minimum ARR from clients that you serve, as well as at least 2
ARR or MRR?
MRR, sorry, and then at least 2 or 3 successful client implementations that have testimonials that we can review. Now, you have to remember on our side, right, we have an interest in keeping the ecosystem very top notch because we want it to be the case that if anyone comes in and like clicks on a partner in our directory, they have a good experience. So that's why we do that. And that's actually kind of always been the case, even when the ecosystem was more nascent. So you have this chicken and egg problem of, I want to start an agency, and I want to start an agency that's going to be listed on the Clay directory, but I can't be listed on the Clay directory until I get good enough to be listed on the Clay directory. But I sort of think about this as like the journey of just, you shouldn't be asking, how do I get listed on the Clay directory? You should be asking, how do I create the most successful agency that I can for myself, utilizing Clay and maybe other tools as part of my services? And if you're answering that second question, right, the answer is, there's a 0 to 1, then a 1 to 10, and like a 10 to 100 journey. The 0 to 1 is often the hardest part. And I think this is where we also might have a little bit of a debate, which is 0 to 1. My advice to most people, especially if you're just getting started, is as much as you can, if you can, just find people that need your help and offer to give your help potentially for free for the first few,
Mm-hmm.
but ideally lowly paid, so that you can get proof of the fact that you are good at what you do on your resume. So a good example is when I started my own automation agency half a decade ago. I leveraged the fact that I had done automation consulting work already in a few previous jobs and just reframed that as like client projects. And I was in like the no code ops community back before it got acquired by Zapier and I think MakerPad.
Okay.
And there were just always people with requests in those Slack communities of like, hey, can I do so and so? Or like, what do I need to do so and so? And I would go in and jump on threads and be like, hey, here's what I think you could do. And I would even just DM them a longer plan of like, here's exactly what you would do step by step, because I'm assuming other people are going to want to fight for that potential contract. And then they would be excited. They'd be like, this sounds great. Sounds like you know what you're talking about. I don't know the first thing about this space is why most people are looking for agency partners. What would it look like to work together? And I did, I think 2 or 3 of those projects completely for free in exchange for, and I made it explicit, like a client testimonial, proof of the work, and the ability to like refer potential new customers to that person.
What do you mean proof of the work? Is that just like the ability to make a video of
A
it?
case study.
Case study. Okay.
Yeah, or like being able to show the results.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, many of them didn't want to share, understandably so, any templates of automation. They're like, this is our IP. We want to keep it as our IP. Let's keep it that way. But I was like, I want to be able to talk about how many hours we saved you each week, what the like increase in output is, what the increase in like team capability is. And they were like, okay, that's fine with us. So that was how I got my start in that agency world. The reason I bring this up for like anyone trying to start an agency today is because that will lead to the next result, which is like, hey, I want to create a successful agency. Let me figure out how to do that from scratch without a directory, because everyone on the directory also got started without using the directory as their initial source of clients. And then once you get good enough, the bar is not that high, right? The bar is just like, can you serve clients? Have you served clients successfully?
Yeah.
Then we're more than willing to list you on the directory, which will lead to more people seeing you, more people inquiring about your business.
Yep.
But then the last thing that I'll say here is that even already at like, 80 to 90 partners, the directory is getting crowded.
It is.
And a lot of people, say that either they feel like they've seen a decrease in traffic coming from the directory, which of course is going to happen when you go from like 10 to 90.
Yeah.
And also the directory is maybe not as sexy as you think it is, right? Like you as an agency owner, once you build a business, also need to qualify your leads. It's going to be just as important for you as a business owner to say no to bad business as it is to like filter out what the right business is. And so a lot of folks will also say like, hey, I'm getting interest from the directory, but these aren't clients in my ICP, right? These aren't the people that I actually serve really well.
Right.
And we'll say that's fine. Like we'll route the right people to you eventually.
Yeah.
But it's just another marketing ploy. And so the things that you need to do to build a successful agency outside of the directory are post on LinkedIn more, have a growth channel, figure out how you acquire customers, build word of mouth. Can you use customer referrals to build your initial 20 sets of customers? All the stuff that is agnostic of whatever tool you're using.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I do see people get leads from the Clay Experts directory. It has, like you said, as we get more people on there, it's just overwhelming, and I know that I'm glad that you all are working on solving that. But it is a great source of business, and it's also serves as social proof as well, because people may, they know that Clay has some sort of stamp of approval there. So for you, when you started working with clients from communities, were you qualifying them pretty heavily, or were you just saying, hey, like this person needs a problem, I guess I'll just jump in, needs help, and I guess I'll just jump in and help them?
Yeah, this is a good question. This is where, this is something I would probably have gone and done better if I were rerunning my automation agency, or I would have just done differently. And this leads to like another question about how you might start an agency in the Clay ecosystem specifically. But I was just taking anyone under the sun that would come my way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was beneficial because I didn't do work for free for that long then, right? It was very easy. Like I just spent a weekend digging through Slack communities, messaging a bunch of people. And then it's very easy to get free work, which is why I wouldn't recommend you do it for too long.
Mm-hmm.
The other downside to free work is that someone's expectations of your like ability to deliver, timeline, et cetera, are going to be fundamentally different if you're working for free versus even if they're paying you $20 or $30 an hour. So I did, those 2 or 3 additional projects just to like flex the muscle. And then I just started asking people, okay, can I charge you $50 an hour? And then we went up to $80, and then we went up to $100 an hour. And then I stopped charging hourly because it just didn't make sense in my opinion. I started charging by the project. And what was tricky about the like general, I branded my agency as like a low code, no code automation agency. Surface area of that is huge. It means you can do a million things. If you want to automate scheduling, down. If you want to automate customer onboarding, you want to automate internal employee onboarding, you want to automate outbound was part of those projects, name it and we'll do it. I think that is a very hard thing to scale.
Yeah.
Because there's only so many people who are able to, that I can like hire, bring on, et cetera, as contractors or employees that are able to cover that amount of surface area.
Right.
I tested it. I had a few friends come work for me at the agency, and then they were able to do the projects that I upskilled them on really well. And then they leaned on me very heavily for anything that fell outside of that kind of boutique nature.
Yeah.
So ironically, this is actually how I ended up at Clay, right? One of the things that we started to do was focus on, hey, a lot of people are asking me for help on this like outbound list building, prospecting automation. And so something we did for a year as well is I built a whole system that was just like, you take it and you deploy it. It was Airtable, Phantom Buster, Hunter.io, Drop Contact, and a few other tools. So I asked people to buy their own subscriptions to all those tools. And then I would help put a system in place where their reps would go in, fill out the Airtable form. They would send in a LinkedIn Sales Nav link. It would then, after 20 to 30 minutes, go scrape it, waterfall it across those 3 data providers, validate the emails, and then send the CSV to somebody's email. And so we sold that as a system for a while.
Oh, wow.
And then that ended up becoming Clay. Well, that didn't become Clay, but I ended up moving that over to Clay.
Very interesting. Okay.
But yeah, the last thing, to bring it back to what you're talking about, it's just about specializing eventually. I think if you want to build a long, sustainable, large surface area business, you do sort of have to specialize to be able to scale,
right,
and then come back. Unless you decide to go the boutique route, which you can also do very well.
Right. Yeah, I think for a lot of people, the algorithm, I see some people start out, they know exactly what they want to do. I'm going to do outbound for B2B SaaSes, retainer, 5K, 6K, 7K a month, something like that. And they just go. I think in the majority of cases, it's more like pick up what work you can, whether that's paid or not, and see what you like, see what you're good at, and play around. You may get, after a while, at least get paid to learn. And that's fun. It makes money. It's probably less lucrative in the beginning, but it pays pretty well once you get rolling a little bit.
It does. And you can, I think, especially like the boutique route, right? You can go the boutique route. You can be a one-man consulting shop, especially in the day of AI.
Yeah.
And you can charge $300, $500 an hour or like large sums on projects and make a tidy living. And the other benefit to that is if you're someone who likes learning new things and working on novel projects, it's more exciting. Part of the reason we shut down the like outbound delivery system service is that it just became boring for me after a period of time. It's like, okay, the same Airtable setup over and over again, the same Zapier setup, same Phantom Buster, just for a new client. That's what software is for. That's why Clay exists, and people should just use Clay.
Makes sense. So back to the for free versus for... No, I see an argument for that. I see like if you come in and say, hey, I'm really good, like you want them to know that you're really good. However, I'm doing it for free for this very specific reason. The thing I want to optimize for is if I'm working for free or for $10 an hour, I don't want them to think of me as someone who's normally a $5, $10 an hour person. I want to let them know like my normal rate is, you can make it up. My normal rate's $100 or $200 an hour. I'm doing this specifically for a case study. And this looks like it could be a good fit. So it's maintaining that frame of, I'm good. It can absolutely work, especially if they're a Keystone client that's gonna, Jacob Tuweiner talked about this a little bit, like gonna refer you to their CEO friends, or they'll be a great logo for a case study, or that you can help them. And so your time is well spent. I think it also depends on the industry. Like Alex Hormozy would not disagree with your approach. I think he tells people to work for free as well, if it makes sense. What I see right now, the supply demand with Clay for Clay work is pretty high. So it depends. It depends on, like both could make sense. But I tell people, start working for $50 or $100 an hour fairly soon. And it tends to work if they're more on the technical side.
I think so. And I think I'll like wind back some of what I said, because I think your point is valid. Some of my desire to just go immediately work for free was that I was 22. I was young. I had very little professional background or experience, very little something backing me up. So I think free was more relevant.
That makes sense.
At that point in my career. For anyone starting out, especially today, given supply and demand, don't jump to free. I take it back, right? Use free as your way
People are
to
watching. Yeah.
be able to garner case studies. But like your first attempt should be, hey, I'm building an agency, doing this type of work. Here's why I'm good at it. I can show you that I'm good at it by giving you like a digest of exactly what I would do. I'm willing to offer you like a discounted rate because you're going to be one of my first design partners and initial clients, the way that most companies would do with initial company design partners, and see if people bite on that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, never do work for free where you could get it paid would be the other philosophy I have here. Maybe the path that I would actually suggest is attempt to give people a discount or a deal. Make it very explicit, like you were saying earlier, about I am building something and you're an early partner, and this is why I want to give you a special deal, but I'm willing to work with you and be flexible on this. And then if people, like if you get, 20 people that say no to that, maybe then consider working for free. But then the last thing I would add here is make sure that working for free will solve your problem.
Yeah, that's a good
right?
point.
If 20 people say no to you and it's because they just don't trust that you can do the work, then the working for free thing will solve the issue. But if 20 people say no to you and it's just because they don't need your services, going and working for free, people will take that because it's so easy to say yes to. But it doesn't solve your core issue. So you're just going to end up having learned for very little, aka nothing, and then not being able to grow the business you want to.
I made that mistake of working on pay for performance. And I think I've seen a lot of people get especially burned with that. I think that getting paid, while not the only solution, is a good filter for clients that won't take advantage or like value someone else's time.
Totally agree.
I've seen an interesting pattern. So like I did a post yesterday, I think, on a lot of interest from APAC, like India, especially Philippines. Yeah. It's been surprising. Like our boot camp is not cheap, and I'm still having people from that region in the world sign up, and I love it. It's great. And what I see for a lot of the people who aren't signing up, they're trying to get their start. They couldn't afford the boot camp, and the Clay like $349 a month plan is expensive for them. How do I get practice? It's another chicken egg problem. How do I get practice if I can't afford the plan with webhooks and HTTP API, custom integrations, et cetera? And in that case, like kind of to argue for what you said originally, like working for free is actually getting someone to pay for your Clay plan and help them out. I think that can make sense.
Yeah, so it's really just customizable, right? But I think that the main goal is like paid, free, or otherwise. If you're starting an agency today and you're answering the question of like, how do I build an agency that earns the amount of money I want it to and is like a fun, fulfilling career for me? To start, you have to be like, how do I get the skills? And then once you've got the skills, you have to ask, how do I get the clients? And then once you've got the clients, you have to ask, how do I grow the business if I want to acquire more clients, to be able to serve more people? And then if you're answering all of those questions well and customizing and personalizing your approach to your own situation, we will inevitably put you on the directory, I promise.
Yes.
If you do a good job, right?
Yes.
And that's the way to think about it.
So speaking of learning Clay, I see some people learn Clay really, really quickly, and some people struggle more to learn Clay. And the way I think about it is it's like an iceberg. Some people have the iceberg skills under the surface, and they just have to learn that last part, which is Clay. And then some people have to learn the whole iceberg of skills. What would you say are those skills beneath the surface that make it easier for some people to learn Clay fast?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one that I talk about a lot because for a while we used to be like, oh, if you have an engineering background, if you know how to program, you learn Clay faster. And then we ran into that's like necessary but not sufficient, or not even necessary. It's correlated true. I would say like 80% of people who are able to program and have an engineering background also quickly pick up Clay.
Yeah.
There's still 20% of people, shockingly, who I've met and were like, I know how to code. I've been a software engineer. I still don't understand this tool.
Interesting.
And my hypothesis, this is not a diss to anyone that I've ever met who's told me that, by the way. My hypothesis is that just like programming is a skill, there are people who learn how to program, and then as a result of learning how to program, also learn how to think in systems, because you have to be able to think logically, procedurally, and sort of in like a way that accounts for mutual exclusivity. I'm accounting for edge cases. I'm understanding what data looks like. I know that a string variable is different from an int variable, even if it looks the same on my screen. There's basic building blocks of that. And then there's the like, okay, I know how to build systems. And what I think I have seen is the like commonality between people is like, I think it's actually the skill that we've been talking about for a long time. Like even back when I was in college, way back in the like early 2010s, professors of mine were all talking about how do we teach computational thinking to people. It means you don't have to be a software engineer, but I want you to be able to think like a software engineer. And that's the skill that's really important. And what I've come to learn is that just because you are a software engineer and you know how to communicate to the computer does not necessarily mean that you have learned the skills of how to think like a software engineer. And how to think like a software engineer is ultimately the most important skill for all of these no-code and low-code platforms. Because we're not changing the paradigm of programming, we're making it more accessible. Zapier, Airtable, Notion, Clay, Figma, even to a certain extent, right? You have to be able to think in layers, literally and figuratively, and be able to think step by step. And so if you don't yet have that kind of first principles systems thinking mindset, it takes time to develop it. And I think the only way really to develop it is through practice. And so practice, and this is what's hard for a lot of people, often looks like trial and error. You have to build things, and then you have to see them not work. And then once you see something not work, you have to develop the instinct for, it's not that the computer is wrong. The computer is never wrong. The computer is literally never wrong. It is just a machine that does exactly what you tell it to. It is that you have communicated what you want to do incorrectly to the computer. And so it's this, if we really trace it all the way back to what I'm trying to say here, it's this like, I understand how to speak to technology at like a very core level skill that is the most fundamental building block for anyone learning Clay. And I think there's lots of ways that we train that. That's what cohorts and like university are trying to do. We give people frameworks. And this is like something that I think I often get rival advice about in learning Clay. Like I really like giving people frameworks so that they have a language to be able to speak Clay. In the same way that when you learn a programming language, you think about functions and log and time and optimization. Clay, we are developing that language ourselves. So like that is the current iteration of the framework. But I love that whenever I mention it, people say, oh, this is my find step. This is my enrich step. This is the transform thing. And it like gives them something to anchor to.
Right.
Instead of like, oh, I click the button here to do the thing here, and then I click this thing here to do the other thing here.
Right. They're thinking in bigger chunks.
Exactly. Thinking in bigger chunks so that people can access it a little bit more easily. So that's, I would say, the most important skill that is like underpinning the Clay, like how fast do I learn this? I would say the other skills too, though, that build on that are, even if you're a systems thinker, if you have zero experience with the GTM tool landscape or zero experience with the problem itself, you have to build that experience to know what the solution sets are. So another really concrete example of this is I did my time and my days as a BDR for like a year, and I think that really intimately familiarized me with the pains of how manual people really work in those careers. And that's part of what led to the agencies. Like I was like, okay, I know I can automate some of this stuff, so let me just automate BDR work. And then that led to automating BDR clients, and now it led to Clay. If you don't have that experience or skill set, if you've never written a cold email before, if you've never had to do outbound campaigns at scale to people, you don't know what good looks like.
Right.
And so you have to learn what good looks like, and you can learn from reading Eric Nowoslawski's post on LinkedIn. He does a great job, but there is no substitute for the I have built this from scratch to create this campaign from scratch, seen the results delivered for real clients, and then had to update and iterate my copy along the way.
Yeah.
Because as you and I both know, especially in the cold outbound game, Eric talks about this all the time. He has plenty of clients that he doesn't get the results for because their industry or their niche or the messaging is off. And so he goes about reconfiguring or refunding those people in a specific way because he's so value oriented.
Yeah.
But that muscle cannot be taught through a textbook or through a video, right? So like, okay, I've hit an issue. I need to figure out how to go around this issue. What are the creative ways that I can try and attack this problem from multiple angles? And at what point do I just say, this is a problem I can't solve? That's that other soft skill that I think really, really helps agency owners build this muscle that makes Clay then just the tip of the iceberg skill that they're learning.
Do you think that Clay is the best way to learn that systems thinking skill? Or if you were taking along you, how would you tell someone to learn that?
Yeah, this is a tough question. I think about this one daily because I've always been like, how do we teach more computational thinking to more people quickly? I think in some ways, Clay can be a good tool for learning it. I will say, no one from Clay, kill me for this, please. We are not the best place to learn it right now. And here's why. You have to pay to learn it. And we're working on this. So I am hoping that come 3 to 6 months from now, I can eat my words and be like, Clay is the best place to do this. It's hard to tell someone, learn how to think computationally. And if you don't know how to think computationally, you need to learn through trial and error and just seeing what works and what doesn't and deeply understanding all the edge cases of the issues you're trying to solve. And then tell them, here's 1,000 credits. This is all you get to play with. So that's why I would say,
Upside burn them.
yeah, exactly. Oops, it's gone. Now I need to pay $150 to $800 a month minimum just to even have the ability to learn computational thinking, let alone the tool. So we have a bunch of things planned that are going to make that better, I hope. That's part of why we have cohorts, et cetera. So if you enroll in a cohort, we teach you how to do it with low credit volumes. We teach you and earn credits throughout the course if you complete the assignments. That, I think, is a much bigger step towards I can learn how to think computationally with Clay. But my biggest advice to anyone who's like, I don't know how to think computationally yet, is just go to Code Academy. It's free. It costs nothing. And take the Intro to JavaScript course and finish it.
Yeah.
Or take the Intro to Python course. But JavaScript is going to be better because you'll learn it in Clay. And I think you do this in the boot camp as well.
I actually recommend one of their courses. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
There we go. It's helpful.
I would like to see people. So the Code Academy course is great, but if someone uses AI alongside little projects in their browser or whatever, it's even better.
So much.
As long as you understand what you're playing with.
Yeah. But I think, and this is where, maybe this is a hot take, I would still recommend everyone go through the raw rote Code Academy 101, because then what you're building, there's two things that you gain from that. Thing number one is hopefully the initial layer of this computational thinking foundation that will help you, not just with Clay, by the way, it's going to help you across any digital tool that you ever use. If you can understand how to think computationally, it will help you with Zapier, with Airtable, with Notion, with Figma. You will learn how to think in blocks and then assemble blocks together to build beautiful systems. But the second thing, very practically, that it teaches you is also the language of technology. So for example, if I have never had to speak the language of technology, I don't know what the difference between a string and an int is, right? I'm a human that sees a number in a cell, and I see the number 2, and I see it the same twice. To me, that means nothing different. And so now when I hit an issue trying to run an AI formula in Clay with the number 2, and it casts me this error string type force not int, it just looks like mumbo jumbo to me.
Right.
But if you understand how to speak the basic building blocks of the language of technology, now I hit that error message and I can say, oh, I get it. There's a type issue. It's probably because the computer, even though I see the number 2, is formatting the number 2 as a different thing. And I'm trying to do math on something that the computer thinks is a sentence.
Yeah.
So I need to change the sentence to the computer recognized format for math so I can do math on it. And if I want to use a regular expression to extract that text, I need to change it back. This is actually not true, but it's a good example, from a number to a text format. And that specific, I can understand the language of computers is so, so helpful, no matter where you are in your career and what you're doing. And then the last thing I'll add to this is AI is the ultimate unlock for this.
Yes.
Because the muscle that you really need to build, you can do this with Code Academy, but you should be doing this in any tool you learn. So when you're a new Clay user, you try something, it doesn't work, you get an error message. The people who succeed with Clay and other tools long term are the ones who take that error message, copy paste it into Google, and then say, what is going wrong here? Right? And then that loop of I am constantly taking failure modes and figuring out, even if I can't fix it, what's happening is what builds literacy and all this technology over time. And AI can help you infinitely more with that. It was way more frustrating before. I used to teach people when I was teaching computational thinking at a prior program how to Google, because even learning how to Google those things is very specific. I have to navigate Stack Overflow and then I have to navigate these forums. AI is a way faster way to do your error troubleshooting. So that's my brief rant on computational thinking and learning.
I love it. So good. Well, thank you so much, Yash. Really, really good conversation. Can't wait for people to see this.
It's always a great conversation. Love to have more with you, Nathan. Love what you're doing. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much as well.